Hi everybody, I'm Elsa and this is Graphic Novel Review. This month I read Miles Morales Volume 1, straight out of Brooklyn. I know the new Spider-Man movie came out, so I thought I would keep it going with superheroes this month. So we meet Miles Morales, who lives in Brooklyn, and in this story, so there's older Spider-Man, and then there's Miles, who was also bitten by a spider, and like they kind of share duties. They know each other, but like I feel like the constant struggle with Miles is that people don't take him very seriously. One, because he's so young, and two, there's this other Spider-Man that people assume is like the Spider-Man. But yeah, we get to know Miles a little bit. He goes to like this high school where like he has a dorm there. He basically lives there. And he's very close to his parents. His parents do know that he is the Spider-Man. He hid it from them initially, but he's very close to them, and they could kind of see through like all his like sneaking around. So he just let them know he's Spider-Man. He also has a best friend, and he also knows that he is a superhero. He also has a not girlfriend who he hangs around with a lot. And that's kind of where we get started, is just getting to know Miles a little bit. He's going to high school. He's keeping a journal, so we get a lot of like his thoughts about what's going on in his normal life and in his superhero life. So Miles one night is doing his Spider-Man thing when he notices like these people in uniform kind of stealing, and he goes to try to interfere, and then is quickly stopped by this guy in a huge Rhino suit. They kind of get into a fight, but he quickly realizes that this Rhino guy isn't the bad guy. He's apparently like a super villain or someone who was doing crime, but he isn't the one that is leading these people to steal. So prior to this, Miles was hanging out with his not girlfriend and her little cousin. He's a little boy. So during this Rhino fight thing where he's like, I'm just looking for my ex-wife's niece, and Miles is like, oh, okay, you're fine. But then he notices that one of the kids is his not girlfriend's cousin. So they're kind of confused. The kids get away somehow, and we meet the actual villain of this situation, and it's this guy named Tombstone, who's controlling these children. So now the Rhino's wife's niece is missing, and so is Spider-Man's girlfriend's cousin, and they decide to join forces so that they can find these kids, find out what's going on with them. So the next morning, Miles has to go to high school. He is not getting much sleep because he's part of these two very distinct worlds where he's a literal superhero, but is still like he's a kid, and he has to go to high school. And his not girlfriend is like, hey, my cousin is missing. I don't know what to do. So he feels very committed to try and help find this kid. So Spider-Man and the Rhino guy meet up the following night, and they are trying to find these kids. They do find them. Captain America just shows up. Great. But he's really apprehensive at working with this Rhino guy because apparently he does have like a criminal past, but he's trying to do better. But Captain America is still like keeping an eye on him, and Miles isn't as apprehensive. This Rhino guy is kind of like that stereotype of like really strong but like temperamental and kind of emotional, so they kind of have to deal with that. He's got like a short fuse, so they're trying to get these kids, right? And then we find one of the supervillain Tombstone's henchmen has like this weird eye laser mind control kind of thing. That is why these children are like so robotic and just like following the lead and just like doing whatever they're told to do. And he tries to exert that on the three superheroes when they're trying to get the kids and just go. But I think it's Captain America who kind of like pushes through, and they get the kids. Kids are doing fine. They've been freed, but we're still dealing with like, what is this Tombstone guy like up to? So then it kind of turns into like a Ferris Bueller meets Marvel situation, where Miles is still doing his superhero thing, but he has like this principal. The principal of his school is kind of like onto Miles. It's very much like a Ferris Bueller. He's like, he's too smart. I'm gonna make an example out of him because he thinks he can just like do whatever he wants. So Miles and his roommates at this special high school, decide, and I can't remember who the artists are, but there's a museum exhibit and they really want to go see it because it's the journals of like Mos Def and Jay-Z, and I can't remember who else, but they're really excited to go see it. And so they're going to play hooky. One of their friends has an ear infection, so his not girlfriend and this other friend that he has, whose name is, I think, Judge, are playing hooky, and they're going to go to the Brooklyn Museum. And while all of this is happening, that teacher is like the principal from Ferris Bueller, who he's taking his day off. And this principal is just like, nope, today's the day where I'm going to catch him and I'm going to scold him and make an example out of him. So this is Miles's big day off, right? But things keep happening. They're taking the train to go to the museum, and a supervillain derails the train. They get to the museum, and this random supervillain like freezes the museum. Like, it's just nothing can go right. Miles has to do a quick wardrobe change and save the situation multiple times on his day off. Miles' friend, the one that's sick at home, is like, hey, the principal's looking for you. He was just here. You need to come home. So then all three of them are going around Brooklyn trying to get home. And they make it. However, the principal does call Miles' parents. He's like, I think he's up to something. And since he's so close to his parents, they're like, hey, we trust you. You're responsible. We're not going to punish you for skipping school. We know that you're very responsible, but also be responsible. So it's a learning moment for Miles. It's like, he's responsible for so much. And I think at some point he says, sometimes I feel that I am a failure in every aspect of my life. And I was like, no, he's got a lot going on. So again, we see Miles just like hanging out in his normal life, getting breakfast with his best friend. And once again, there is a superhero moment. There's like, we have like these, I think he calls them like gentrified gangbangers, where they're like these guys in suits and like these people who own this block, and they're like fighting, and he's like, who, trying to get information out of them. He's like, who are you? And of course, a part of these the guys in the suits, the gentrified gangbangers, work for Tombstone, and they're kind of like trying to take over Brooklyn. So later that night, he's like scoping out the situation, and the guys in the suits are there, and he's doing fine. And then all of a sudden, we see this other superhero just like fly down, and she's like amazing. She's like super strong, but she's kind of a little bit more like physical justice. Like she has a backstory. So Tombstone, I think, killed her best friend or someone she was very close to. So she's pretty vengeful, and Miles is kind of like trying to work with her, trying to get to know her, but like at the same time, she's just so very like just like really vigilante justice in a way that Miles does not feel comfortable with. So the following night, again, Miles is looking out for Tombstone, and his plan is kind of foiled by this other superhero who kind of finds her way to Tombstone and is trying to kill him, is trying to do something horrible. But like Miles like grabs onto her with his web, and I was like, hey, you are better than this. Like, you're not Tombstone. You're not bad. So, like, don't do this. Kind of, like, reflect on... Like, don't become a supervillain trying to find justice. And that convinces her. So we have, like, this moment where Miles really has to reflect on himself while he's talking to this other superhero. Beforehand, after all this is happening, he's really living in two worlds, and his not girlfriend is like, you're clearly lying to me, you're like keeping a lot of secrets, and he just can't bring himself to be vulnerable. Like, in a lot of ways, he's like super strong, but doesn't like let people in. He's like close to his parents, close to his best friend. But other than that, he's just like confiding in this journal. We don't really get to see him open up to other people. So he's having this conversation with this other superhero, and it's like a very intense, like, this is our life story. Which she shares quite a bit. She's like, I think it's her father or her grandfather were like a really big supervillain, and she's like not trying to go down that road. She's trying to find justice. And she even discloses her actual name. And then she asks Miles, like, okay, who are you? Because she even like, you can see her face clearly, like she's been very honest with him. And she's like, okay, who are you? What's your name? And he just says, I'm Spider-Man. And she's like, okay. Kind of noticing that he's a little closed off. So that's just like a little moment that was kind of intense. More than like the fight scenes, like it's kind of an emotional moment. And then we have this like little sneak peek at what will happen next, which Miles finds these files while they were fighting with Tombstone. And he's kind of like, okay, so now I have to deal with this file situation. And you kind of don't know where it's going. And he's like walking around town. And then he's knocking on somebody's door. And it's his uncle. And he's like, I have to ask you something. So like, dun 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 moment. What does this file that was at Tombstone's like safe house, like what does it have to do with his uncle, with him? So I'm thinking perhaps that the other superhero was foreshadowing, since she comes from like a family that were like super villains and now she's a superhero. Maybe that was foreshadowing something's going on with his uncle, or his uncle has some sort of expertise. I don't know where that's going, but I do believe that I will keep reading. So let's see. I would give Miles Morales Volume 1 Straight Out of Brooklyn a 3.5 rhinos out of 5 rhinos. I did enjoy it, but I'm not used to reading comic books like this. Next month, we'll do something a little bit different. That is all for Graphic Novel Review. I'll see you next time.